Onwards and upwards we march. Welcome back to my presentation series on the Generation 2 Elite Specializations. On this one, we're going to be looking at the Mesmer Elite spec, known as the Mirage. We've gone through heavy, medium, light, and now finally one last time, heavy, medium, and light. Starting with light, the Mirage is an upgrade to the Mesmer profession, and of all of Gen 2, I think it is the most controversial. I think it is the most muted and subtle of all the elite specs, but let's have a look at what they've been going for and see what we think. This is the Mirage.
The Mirage taps into the vast magic of the Crystal Desert to move through battle like shifting sand. These Mesmers use whirling axe attacks to fight at mid and close range. Their deception skills baffle enemies and create fragile constructs which shatter when touched, creating Mirage cloaks to avoid enemy attacks instead of dodging away from them.
So, why do I say that the Mirage is the most muted of the elite specs? Well, you will have noticed one thing that the devs tend to rely on when expanding a class and giving it new fun things to do is they add extra F abilities. And on the Mesmer 2 years ago for Heart of Thorns, that's exactly what they did. We gained an extra shatter, if you guys remember. We had the 5th shatter, which was Continuum Split. This time, there is no F5. Not only is there no F5, but they haven't replaced any of the existing shatters or done anything of the sort. There is no deeper capacity for more illusions. This isn't like an illusionist spec. It could easily look, if I just want my weapon here and my utilities, like we're on a regular Mesmer. And that's quite a rare thing, honestly, for elite specializations. But there is more going on here. It's just a little bit under the surface. I do think it's a very complicated spec and a really interesting one. It's one that appeals to me a lot. Broadly speaking, it's honing in on this idea of being deceptive about your clones, about pretending to be clones, about duping people, and it's led to some very weird, very fiddly mechanics that I think should be quite fun to dig in with you guys. Let's start simple though, and let's start high level. It's a Condi spec, very much a Condi spec. People have been talking a little bit about being able to play a power version of the Mirage, and I'm sure that's possible. But generally speaking, it really seems to be all about damage and Condi, which is a breath of fresh air for, I think most Mesmers will agree, who have been, especially in PvE for a long time, been playing on supportive builds, thanks to the incredible support that the Chronomancer has been able to push out. Now, some of you who may have had hands-on with the Mirage during the demo could question me saying, hey, this is a conditioned damage elite specialization, and wonder whether you can really get that much damage out on the thing. And if there's ever a video from this series that needs this disclaimer, it's this one. Remember, specific demo tuning is likely to change. The fact that all the axe skills apply conditions isn't likely to change, but the quantities, durations, and types of conditions is. And I do think that when you look at the Mirage, the kind of stats it gives you in the traits and what many of its ambushes and so forth do, it's a Condi spec, and it's just going to take a little bit of fine-tuning to get it to the place where we can really reliably compete with other DPS options. Alright, so let's take a little bit of a look at Axe to roll ourselves in. So we start off with Lacerating Chop, which is a bit of damage and bleed. Then we've got Ethereal Chop, which is damage and torment. Then we've got Mirror Strikes, which is 2 damage, 1 bleed, and 1 torment. And we can also trait that to be a little bit stronger. So I'll show you guys how this looks. I've heard people describe this as kind of a PvE Condi stacking weapon and a little more, and I think that that's fair for them to describe, at least with the auto, as far as the auto attack's concerned. It's very close range, you're very vulnerable to be able to do this. It's the kind of thing that's really going to work more in PvE than on other places. But there you go, that's what the auto does, just stacks lots of torment and lots of bleed, which are 2 of the main conditions that come on this elite spec over 3 targets. The 2 is your clone generation. So as you guys should know about Mesmer, I would hope, when your main hand weapons as a Mesmer always have some kind of clone on them. So for staff, that's Phase Retreat, where we blink back with the skill 2. For the sword, it's our skill 3, our Illusory Leap, which we can then double up and swap with so that we can move in and immobilize someone. For the great swords, if I can find my great sword, there you go. This is a great sword. For the Great Sword, it's the skill 2 on the Mirror Blade. They all generate a clone somewhere. Axe is new, but it's no different. It also gets a clone. It's on the skill 2. The skill 2 uses the ammunition mechanic, so we get 2 maximum charges. It's called Lingering Thoughts. We spin forwards, and we strike multiple times, 3 times. We inflict conditions as we do that, and then we leave a Mirage at our starting position. Now, if an enemy is near the Mirage when it expires, a clone is summoned. So what is it? We are a Mirage, right? That's the name of the elite specialization. So what does it mean specifically mechanically when it says we leave a Mirage? Well, that's purely flavor. Okay, so here's what the animation looks like. And you'll see visually behind the golem, as we cast this, we'll do it again. You see like this beautiful pink effect. And what gets summoned out of the pink effect is our clone. So there I just summoned 3 clones and very comfortably. Now you might think, oh, this has got no cooldown with potatoes. It does. Just remember that the cooldown, we gain an extra charge every 8 seconds and we can hold 2 of them. So this is very fun. This is actually quite a lot of generation. But remember, it's if an enemy is near the Mirage when it expires. All right, so if we're actually quite far away from the target when we trigger this, how can I show this? Hopefully this will work like so. If we're actually quite far away, oh, we summoned one onto the other friggin' golem there. If we're actually quite far away over here, no enemies are near that Mirage, and it doesn't summon a clone. So you do want to be close, but you can do interesting things like you just saw there a second ago, where we can actually be standing at this golem, use the 2 on a totally different one, and sort of summon a clone behind us, which is very curious. So that's the way that the 2 works. Generally, it's going to be some good generation for you, and it's actually quite a lot of Condi damage that pushes out there as well. That's actually 3 Torment, and again, over 3 targets. It's also a whirl finisher, so if you are dropping some kind of an ethereal field, as obviously Mesmer gets a ton of access to, like, say, a feedback, we can drop the feedback, and we can use the 2. We put a ton of confounding bolts out, and I really do mean a ton of confounding bolts. So we've got 7 confusion there, purely from the combo finisher. It's just the combo finisher. This is just from using the 2 and then the clones coming up. And you saw the amount of like absurd Condi I started pushing out. So that's sort of really shows the leaning of Axe. Then we've got the 3. It's one of my favorite things about this elite specialization. We get into it very quickly. So it's called Axes of Symmetry. Now, before we read this, you guys should understand something. That if we are running a Mesmer standardly, and say we're using a pistol offhand, when we summon phantasms to attack a target, those phantasms are bound to that target. So here I've got these illusory duelists, right? And I've summoned 2 of them. They are locked onto this golem. Now, if I retarget and I start fighting this golem, the duelists aren't going to they're not going to reselect, right? These phantasms, the flavor reason for this is they're supposed to like exist in the mind of your enemy. And the second this golem died, they despawned. Did you see that? Now, there are some circumstances where your phantasms will persist and they'll retarget in some transition phases at various bosses and things that can happen. But largely speaking, that's the way phantasms work. They are stuck on foes. And same with clones as well. That's the way that the Mesmer has always really worked. The Axe changes that, and in a very fun way. So here, let's read it out. It says, you and all of your Axe clones shadow step to a random location around your target, and then we strike and we apply confusion. So let's just talk about that bit first of all, okay? I will summon a ton of Axe clones here on this light golem. Hopefully the Scourge doesn't mess us up too much. We've got all of these Axe clones, and now we can just run over to this heavy golem, use the 3, and we all just blink around at random in a nice ring, as you can see here. And we all hit the guy for a ton of confusion. And it's really, really saucy. Very, very big damage. It's a leap finisher as well, so you can combo into things on that. Now, the confusion we strike with our hand is 5. And then the clones each strike for 1. So in total, that's going to be 8 confusion. You just slam on someone out of nowhere. But what that did that's really quite special, and you may have noticed, is it changed the focusing of our clones. It actually changed them from their original target, which wasn't really something that was going on before. And I believe this should work as well with other phantasms. So I'm going to summon a duelist and 2 clones, 2 Axe clones, and then I'm going to jump on that heavy golem and watch what happens to the duelist. He should be attacking the small golem, but when we do this, he turns around. Look, he's facing the other way, and his next volley, his next attack, he started attacking this guy. So what this lets you do is kind of ramp up a lot of your phantasm stuff and your damaging stuff and your illusions, basically, and then quickly snap them all over to a new target. If you're really clever about it as well, remember, when the golem dies, all of our stuff should die. But you can get around that now on Mirage with this Axe 3. This is what the Axe 3 is really great at, right? We can summon all of our stuff, and we know this is all going to despawn the second that it goes away, that it dies. So I'm going to make it retarget just at the last second. So we just cause them all to retarget before they could despawn. And now they're still on the battlefield. And if this cooldown was up, I could have bounced over to the light golem as well. And then I could have bounced back to the heavy one and bounced back and bounced back and bounced back. That's really, really, really strong. And it also synergizes very well with the core nature of a Mirage, which is condition damage. So you can pretty much guarantee this target will die anyway because he's loaded up with condies. And you can sort of early snap to a new target. So that's really fun. Don't forget as well that with the core balance change, there are some other alterations in the illusions line. So this is the illusions line. But here we've got this new trait, remember, Phantasmal Force. Phantasms' damage permanently increases whenever they attack or gain might. So this allows your phantasms to ramp. The last thing you want in the world when you're running this trait is for that duelist to despawn after he's gained stacks. So there he's got 4 stacks on his next volley. He'll gain even more, and then they'll gain even more. So there you go, there's 8 stacks. We don't want them to despawn when that golem dies, because they'll lose all their stacks. So now, very simple on a Mirage, you just make them retarget. And now he's still alive, and he's up to 12 stacks. And we get to preserve that ramp instead of them constantly despawning. Previously, kind of phantasmal stuff on Mesmers was only good in situations where you had one big boss that you can continuously be hitting. Because anything with lots of little targets, they'd just be despawning all the time, and they wouldn't ramp well. Well, that is now sort of, through Axe, a little bit more of a thing of the past, because you can get around it. So there you go, that's Axe's asymmetry. I really love the Axe. I love a lot of what the Axe does. Beyond even just this idea of retargeting, I think it's really fun to be able to summon a bunch of clones, say with mirror image here, and then just move even quite far away and then choose to retarget. So there you saw I was out of range with my Axis Asymmetry, but I could still move my clones across to do the dirty work. Now, from a PvP perspective, this is also a really fun skill, because as you can see on the tooltip here, it says that this attack breaks enemy targeting. That has been a thing in Guild Wars 2 before. So like Taunt breaks targeting, Fear, I think, breaks targeting. This breaks targeting for a very important reason. Stealth breaks targeting. This breaks targeting for a very important reason, and that's so that from a PvP perspective, you're running around, you're just suddenly going to get all these Axe guys circle around you, and you don't know which one is the real player. You don't know which one's the clone or which one's the real player. And so in some cases, players, Hollowsmiths, whatever, will be able to use big AoEs to bust them all open and kill all the clones, because the clones are very squishy. But in a lot of other cases, you won't know. And I don't know, it reminds me a lot of like LeBlanc and Wukong plays that you could back years ago when I used to play League of Legends. And I'm sure you guys have got your own thoughts on other games that have done similar things to that. So really, really, really like the Axe 3. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be too viable on anything other than Condi, but, you know, that's the idea of what the Mirage is supposed to be, so maybe it's okay, maybe I can handle that. So there you go, that's the main hand weapon. As I said, we have no F abilities to talk about, so let's just go straight over to the utilities, shall we? Now, we have Deceptions. Deceptions were previously a thief-only thing, and now, well, the Mesmer gets it. Having Deceptions on a Mesmer is a brilliant idea, and almost feels like it could have been there in 2012. I'm not sure if they have any runes that affect Deceptions or anything just yet, and that, of course, is going to change buildcraft and stuff a lot when the expansion comes out. But so far, so we got Deceptions, and they're all quite fun. They're all pretty interesting. First, let's do the heal. False Oasis, it's called. It's a deception. What we do is we create a Mirage at our current location, and we heal over time. When the Mirage expires, it will spawn a Mirage Mirror. And above the tooltip, we can see what the Mirage Mirror is. So this is a big thing with the Mirage specialization. You create these mirrors. I don't actually like the mirror mechanic that much. I think it's a bit uninteresting. They're essentially pickups. They're like health packs, or they're like the little Aegis things that Dragon Hunters were dropping, or they're like the little orbs that Ventari and Staff Revenants were dropping. They're little pickups that spawn on the ground, and if you walk into them, you get a bonus. So a Mirage Mirror is this. It gets dropped on the ground, and if you, the player, go over to it, you shatter it, which gives you something called Mirage Cloak, which we will talk about later, but it gives you damage and weakness on 5 targets around the area. So basically, this heal is going to drop a mirror for all that work, for all that discussion we just had. So there's the Mirage in the area, and then when it despawns, remember the Axe was creating Mirages, but clones came out of them. This one creates mirror. So that was a mirror there, that diamond that we saw. And if we walked into that diamond, it would have exploded, did some damage, and put some weakness out, okay? So we're going to see a lot of these mirrors in a lot of places. So there we go. I'll show you False Oasis once more, and we'll actually walk into the mirror since the cooldown's basically up. There you go. And as we stand next to it, we gain Vigor, as we saw there. So there it is. As we walk in, it shatters. You notice we got a bit of super speed there as well. We will talk about all of that very shortly. So that's a big mechanic, the Mirage Cloak, and we'll just get to that at the end of these utility skills. So next, let's have a look here. We've got another deception. This is Illusionary Ambush. And this is a lot like, to me, it feels a bit like Unravel. It's like a really techie kind of utility skill, and the kind of utility skill that I really enjoy the idea of. So, Deception. You and all of your illusions shadow step to a random point around your target and gain a Mirage Cloak. The illusion's actions are interrupted when they change to the focused target. So what this is, do you remember everything I just discussed about what was cool about the retargeting on axes of symmetry? This is a utility skill version of it. And you might think, wow, that's really boring, wood and potatoes. They've just totally cheaped out and doubled up. Well, it's not really, because again, axe, as I explained, is totally about Condi. What if I want that on any other kind of build? Well, here I can run a very easily accessible version on utility skills that really opens up the kind of builds that you can play, because Illusionary Ambush allows you to play with that under any kind of phantasm, or indeed clone as well, illusions, as you see there. So if you do it with a pistol character, so here I'll show you. Let's summon 2 pistol characters on the medium golem. Duelists. Now I'm going to target the heavy guy, and I'm going to cast. And they're going to blink around, and they're going to be there. Now, there is a further follow-up play that we can make with that, which I will talk about fairly shortly, to do with a new type of skill called ambush skills. But so, yeah, basically, this allows us to juggle our phantasms onto new targets, and I think that's a fun idea. Maybe the cooldown of this is too long, really, but on a 1,200 range, that's quite nice. That means you can use a lot of very close, like, melee phantasms, and really move them very quickly suddenly to a new place. And especially if they're supercharged, because they've been ramping for a while, dropping this suddenly on someone, on a downstate body or something maybe, that could be very, very painful. I mean, as long as there's not too much cleave in the area, the ability to surprise someone with 3 fully ramped phantasms from 1,200 range on no cast, I think that's a lot more powerful than most people appreciate. And of course, the PvEers probably don't care too much, but that might even be fun to juggle with an open. So next we have this utility here. This is Crystal Sands. I love the sound of this, but I think this is one of the worst utilities that they've put in Generation 2. Maybe there's a use for it that I just don't know about. But here, check this out. So draw in shards of crystal sand that confuse foes they pass through on their way to a targeted location. And then when they get there, they create a Mirage Mirror. So we already know what the Mirage Mirror is, and that's cool, and that's fine. But basically, yeah, this is just summon a mirror. And it can do a bit of confusion and a bit of flat damage. So here, look, we'll summon the mirror directly on that golem. The shards come in, they hit the target. We got 3 confusion there, and now there's a mirror on him. And then we can walk into the mirror, and we can explode it in his face. But that's all it is, really. This, to me, feels like this should be the ammunition kind of recharging mechanic or something, or much lower cooldown than 20-second cooldown. It's basically just summon a mirror. And I don't know, there's not too much flavor in it. It's a bit iff. All right, so next we have Mirage Advance. This is kind of like a slightly different version of a familiar thief ability called Shadow Step. So listen to this. Shadow Step and unleash an attack that blinds your target and nearby foes, and then you can reactivate the skill to return to your original position and restore some endurance for yourself. The idea is you're very flighty and you're flicking around and the enemy can't quite tell who you are or where you are, because you've just dipped in and now you're dipping out very fast. But it's like Shadow Step, so we can blink in and we can blink out, but you need a target for this one, right, to unleash your blinding attack. It's on 900 range, so we can do this. We're in, and then we can instantly leave. And oh, he doesn't know who hit him. So you can do that very, very quickly. And then lastly, we have Sand Through Glass. Deception, evade backwards, and leave behind a Mirage Mirror. So this is a very simple, very basic, break a stun, keep yourself alive for a second. A bit quite similar actually to one of the Weaver skills we saw. And we're going to move back for a distance of 300. So if we're caught in a scary moment, whoosh, we do this quick little backflip, and we create a mirror there, which we can run into and do. So you'll notice that all of the deceptions really, they're generating mirrors for us. And maybe it's the mirrors themselves that need to be a little bit stronger. But again, I feel like the cooldowns on a lot of them actually feel just a little bit too high. For a stun break, this is quite cool. And a stun break into an evade is insanely strong on just a 30-second cooldown. But remember, you're no longer a chronomancer, so you're not getting random bits of alacrity that are dropping these down. To talk about the elite. Now, I love the idea of the elite. I just think the tuning is a little bit off. It's a very cool elite. It's called Jaunt. This one doesn't create a mirror, but it does this, okay? Shadow step to a target location and confuse nearby foes. Very simple. But here you will see this one is on ammo, all right? We have 3 charges of this. So we can triple shadow step randomly around dropping reasonable confusion stacks at the same time, cleansing condies for ourselves as well. We don't have to trait or anything. This just cleanses condies. And obviously, if you're going to make it in PvP and Guild Wars 2 of today and so forth, you need some cleanse on there. So this is great. Don't forget that the Mirage is generally condi focused, and one of the core Mesmer weapons that is condi focused is a torch, and the torch has condi cleanse on the 4. So like using these together, you do get a bit of it, right? But yeah, so we have Jaunt, and we just get to teleport around. We get to be flighty. I really like this, and I like how this works with the ammo mechanic. I just think that the range on it is slightly too short. The range is only 400. If this range was like 500, 540, something like that, I think it could be really amazing. But as it stands, it's a little bit restricted. But there you go. So we can sort of jaunt around. And these stacks are constantly recharging for us, constantly recharging. And again, this helps us to be flighty. It helps us to sort of be evasive, keep away from people, and actually load some pressure out at the same time as well. Because this is instant activation, and it's just dumping confusion on that instant activation, which allows us to spike people quite heavily with condi. Now, that idea of doing instant activation stuff, or, you know, casting a jaunt to dump a bunch of condi on someone and damage an elite finisher on someone in the middle of other animations, that idea of multicasting is actually a huge part of the Mirage, and that's what I want to get into next. So there's a whole world of this elite specialization we haven't looked at just yet. This is all sort of the basic stuff. I'll give you a demonstration, by the way, of multicasting. So let's pick Lingering Thoughts. So this is the animation here, kind of a longish animation as we swell through. In the middle of that, I'm going to jaunt, okay? And as you can see there, we actually dump a ton of stuff out, and we can sort of do that if we are so inclined, okay? There's nothing stopping us because it's instant activation. Now, you've noticed on a couple of things as we've been looking through here that when, specifically on the mirrors, right? If we summon a mirror, let's summon one. When we walk into the mirror, we gain this buff. We gain this thing here called Mirage Cloak. And a Mirage Cloak, as this tooltip says, it evades incoming attacks. So what's that all about? Well, remember how we don't get an F skill? Well, we do have a fundamental change nonetheless, even if it's not there on the UI. The fundamental change on this elite specialization affects our dodge roll. And this is one of those things I think that people might dislike, but when you get used to it and you realize how powerful it is, you're sort of not going to care anymore. This is essentially, we do not dodge anymore as a Mirage. If I press my dodge bind, I won't roll in any direction. Instead, I will just stand there and I will put Mirage Cloak on myself. Mechanically, Mirage Cloak just makes us evade. So it's exactly the same as a dodge roll. It's just that now it's a dodge roll that we don't have to actually dodge to do. So watch, I just press space. And I got my evade frames, just as if I dodged, except I didn't have to move anywhere. I didn't have to stop what I was already doing. I can Mirage Cloak in a direction if I want, like that. That's the same, fundamentally, as dodging in a direction. But instead, my hands are free to continue doing whatever the hell I want. And I think what this is doing is tapping a little bit more into the Guild Wars 1 Mesmer stuff, which was all about fast casting. So already that's opened a world of possibilities. A lot of very interesting things. If you play, for example, a very spiky Mesmer Shattery build, and say you're on a greatsword, on a power greatsword. I won't have the amulet and stuff for this, so don't judge the numbers you're about to look too hard, right? But let's say we're going to cast a high-powered cooldown, like Phantasmal Berserker here. This is a very obvious animation. It's a very easily interruptible animation, and anyone who generally watches that will be seeking to dodge right after they see it or to mitigate you doing it. Well, you can now cover this while dodging, like so. And there's nothing saying you can't. Basically, any dodge you have now feels the same as a distort on a core Mesmer. Most people who play Mesmer will be familiar with this. Like, they'll be using some kind of important ability or an important resurrect or an important stomp, and they'll have their F4, this really crazy ability on a 42-second cooldown to distort while they're in the middle of one of those actions. Well, guess what? As a Mirage, you can do that pretty much any time you like. You can dodge stomp someone, because in the middle of pressing F and stomping when you're most vulnerable, all you have to do is dodge roll, put the cloak on yourself, and and you're going to be evading in the middle of it. It's like you get constant little distorts that you can always be pushing out as and when you see the benefit of it. And the amount of ways that can cover you as you nip in, for example, after a jaunt, you can do that. There's all essentially kind of invulnerable as long as you have the endurance. And so I really want you guys to think as well about all the places in the game where there's endurance generation now, and how the Mirage will work when it's affected by that stuff. Even the Tempest, going back to Gen 1, has an interesting trait that puts flat endurance out when applying vigor to people or applying regen to people or something that no one's ever really used before. The Mirage will love as much dodge as it can get. There are so many ways to gain extra endurance through adventurer runes or through sigils of energy and so on, that I think this could be a spec that really shines when you specifically put it into those circumstances, and that is a powerful thing already. But so you might be wondering, well, why did the devs put that on the Mirage? It seems like a bit of an arbitrary thing. I think what they're going for is, the point is, on a Mirage, you summon lots of clones, okay? And the player, just like, remember how Axe 3 sort of jumps everyone in and you don't know which one's the real one? I think that's the idea of the Mirage cloak as well. Because we can now dodge without it actually affecting us animation-wise, it's going to be a bit harder to tell who the player is. Which one the clone is versus which one the player is going to be a little bit more tricky to identify, because you won't obviously see one of them doing a full-on dodge roll anymore because it's all hidden. We can just stand there and sort of dupe people without really showing our hand too much. So I think that's sort of where it comes from. How successful the spec will be in actually going for that, I think is sort of a different discussion to be had, but I think that's where it comes from. So the devs weren't content to just leave it there, though. They didn't just give you this interesting, like, dodge multicast thing. We also gain extra stuff when we're in Mirage Cloak. And so this is where the Mirage really starts to get quite fiddly and quite weird to explain. I think that that's kind of Mesmer all over, really, so maybe it's okay. But so let's have a look at our first minor, and finally we will see how this works. So, first minor, when we become Mirage, we gain Mirage Cloak instead of dodge rolling. And here's the key bit. Ambush skills become available for a short time whenever you gain Mirage Cloak. And also we get new utilities, which are the deception skills. So, whenever we dodge and we have this cloak on us, or whenever we walk into a mirror that we may have summoned, for example, whenever we do this, we're going to get access to new abilities. They're called ambush abilities. Ambush abilities are a lot like what thieves get on their attacks when they're in stealth. So anyone who's played a thief with a dagger, when a thief stealths with the dagger, their skill 1 flips over into backstab. And then if they attack someone from behind with it, it's a lot of damage. Well, the Mesmer now has that functionality on its weapons. Not just the axe, the new Mirage stuff. A lot like how Weaver got mix abilities everywhere, and not just on the sword. Same thing happened here for the Mesmers. The Mesmers have the axe auto chain I showed you earlier. We'll go back through this. But if you look closely, it's got the skill 4. But to trigger the skill 4, we need to put that cloak on us. So here we will summon a mirror. We'll walk into the mirror, gain the cloak, and we can trigger our skill 1, which is an ambush ability, which is much stronger, which does a different thing, okay? So every single Mesmer main hand now has a new auto attack on it. Not a new auto, well, essentially kind of an auto attack as long as you chain enough of the cloak on yourself. A new flip over ability that's like a super powered thing you can do when you have the cloak on you. So you can get the cloak in lots of different ways, by walking into these mirrors on the battlefield or by dodge rolling. Obviously you are limited on the amount you dodge, and you do want to dodge at the specific good moments and not just blow it all and waste it all. But let's go through the ambush abilities, shall we? So first of all, we've got the axe ambush. I just showed you it. Right down here at the bottom, imaginary axes it's called. It says release phantasmal axe that seek out the nearest target after a very short delay. And that's on 200 range, but the seek range is on 400. So the best way to show this off, okay, is I'm going to stand a bit away from this. Now, our regular attacks, they're not going to land from here, are they? However, if I go ambush mode, and we do it, you'll see the axes. They hunted this guy out, and they hit the 2 confusion there. So that's the way that ambush skill works. And if we're closer, of course, we can dump a ton of, stuff down as well. So that's ambush 1. You will find, by the way, with the ambushes that because the cloaks last so little time, it can be kind of fiddly to trigger them sometimes. And I think that's something that's been working against the Mirage a little bit too. Checking out our staff over here, we've got a new ambush. And you'll notice that this is basically just a supercharged version of the regular auto attack. So regularly we get Winds of Chaos, which is a bouncing projectile that does Fury and Might, Bleed, Burning, Vuln, depending on whether it goes to an ally or an enemy. Well, that becomes Chaos Vortex, which still has the Fury and the Might on, but instead it's 3 stacks of Might now. It bounces to 5 targets instead of just 2, and it's double Confusion and double Torment. So it's just way stronger as a bounce. So here's the regular bounce. You see it bouncing between me and the enemy there. And now we're going to ambush, and we're going to do a bounce. This one will bounce 5 times, and it will go, and it will go, and it will go. So there's your 2, and we gain a lot of might from that one as well. So this is the way that the staff ambush works. So then we've got the sword ambush. Now, sword is not a Condi weapon, and it never has been. And so the ambush on this is not Condi either. So this is actually a little bit of space for a power Mirage, as I alluded to earlier in the video. We get Mirage Thrust. I actually really like this. So this is a 600 range leap ability. Lunge at your foe and strike them with your sword, briefly dazing them, and then leave behind a clone at your original location. So we actually get 2 clones we can spawn on sword now. Our auto attack will summon a clone, and it will gap close before we even have to use like illusionary leap. So here we go. I'm going to stand, this is about 600 range away. I'll put a cloak on myself, and then I'll dodge in. Yeah? And we put a little daze, that's a little interrupt. That daze may look tiny and totally unnecessary, but remember, we are playing a Mesmer, guys. And this specifically is power. And what's a great power line on Mesmer? It's domination. And you get all that nasty stuff on domination, like power block, and all these interesting interrupt interactions. I suppose Chaos has also got that great one as well, that then puts immobile and might on you and all of that. So that's actually a really fun synergy. I love the look of Mirage Thrust and the sword ambush. I think that could be a lot of fun. And it's an extra nice little leap. It's more quality of life on that. And I do hope that a powery Mirage build will work, because that could be very fun on that one. So we got the sword. Another power weapon, another great power weapon, as we all know, is the Greatsword. So our regular auto is Spatial Surge there. Well, the ambush is Split Surge. So it's just kind of a stronger version. We're going to shoot a beam at a targeted foe and secondary beams at foes near our target. So it puts a bit more AoE, I guess, on the auto from the Greatsword. This one's less exciting to me. 1200 range, though. So here it is. And we get to the sideways beams that came out. You also get a real sign of the delay on that, by the way, as well here. You can see how long that goes. But the animation is a lot thicker. I think it looks really cool, even if I'm not really too confident that the mechanics of that are so great. But there you go. So you get your split beams on your Greatsword. That's your new ambush there. Next, we have Scepter. And so the Scepter is a Condi weapon. So the regular autos is actually clone generation. If you remember, this is 1 ability, then 2. So you get 2 torment, you get some bleed, and then it creates clones. So the ambush on this one is called Ether Barrage. We blink back a short distance, and we launch a barrage of chaos orbs at our foe, which inflict either confusion or torment each hit. And that's 5 packets of damage and a shadow step duration distance of 2. So here I will show you. We're going to blink back now after 1 full chain, and that we've just nipped back a little bit. And we've kind of gone a bit ham there. We feel a little bit like a duelist, I feel like, almost. And so for as much as we can put things on us, we get that pretty cool ambush there. And I actually quite like the Scepter one. Maybe you're going to run Axe Torch on one set, and then you'll run, Scepter something on the other set. Maybe Scepter Torch again, I don't know. So there you go, that's that ambush. Now, theoretically as well, I've been looking forward to doing this with you guys. We do have another weapon. We've seen all of the above land ones, because remember, it's only on the autos that we get ambushes, but there are underwater weapons. So I'm not actually going to go all the way out to a pool of water to look at these first. I'll confirm that they exist first. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go to our build panel, and we're going to scroll down. Oh, it doesn't actually show on the list, does it? It doesn't show on the list. So they could exist, it's just they'll be hidden. Fine, we will go to World vs. World. Let's see, guys. They did it for the Weaver, and they did it for Soul Beast stuff. Let's see if the good old Mirages get underwater ambushes on their... What do they get? Spear and Trident, I think. Let's see. All right, so we're underwater. Let's mouse over. We do! Good job, ArenaNet. Look at this! Okay, so we get Ambush Assault. I've never seen this. Blink to our target from 600 range away and unleash a series of low damage strikes that rapidly strike vulnerability. So we're looking at power on this one. A 600 range blink in. Let's proc our dodge. Move on in. So there you go. Lots of vulnerability on that. And then the ambush over here, I guess we can't see until this jellyfish is dead. So hold on. Let's do this quickly. Is Wave of Panic. Release a wave of energy that interrupts and confuses. That's not just an interrupt, that's huge. That's a stun. There's a half-second stun with some confusion as well. So if you guys want to see the animation on this one, there you go. That's the wave of panic on that poor little gulper fish there. So those are the ambushes. Those are some of the new things that you get available to you. So you can not just cover most of the things that you do and with evade frames now while you're on a Mirage. You can hide the fact that you're dodging. You can sort of play evasively and dupe with your clones. But you also get access to all of these new abilities that will hopefully open up some of the playstyles and classic playstyles that may have fallen a bit out of favor because of power creep and so on over the years. Now, things get quite interesting when we look at traits on the Mirage. Now that we understand baseline what it does, I'm quite excited to show you particularly one of the Grandmasters, but some of the other stuff too. So let's get into the traits. First, let's look at miners. So yeah, we get Mirage Cloak, and as we cycle here through, we can see all of our ambushes. Oh, there you go. We could have previewed the ambushes using this, but hey, that's fine. The next miner is Nomad's Endurance. Shatter skills will give us Vigor now, and then that Vigor gives condition damage. So now when we shatter, we get Vigor. Feels a lot like, I guess, tools on an engineer. And Vigor is obviously something you want a lot of on the Mirage, because that increases your amount of dodges you get, which increases the amount of Mirage Cloaks you can get, which increases the amount of ambushes you can do. The next miner as well, you've been noticing probably throughout the course of this video, Speed of Sand. Gain super speed when you gain a Mirage Cloak. So yeah, that's been pulsing on quite frequently. Now, the devs have done something quite clever and quite hacky on this one. So here, as we pick up this mirror, we gain Mirage Cloak, we gain super speed. They've done something quite hacky in that, you know how we don't dodge anymore? But dodging isn't just about giving yourself evade frames. It's also about moving, right? It's about getting out of danger sometimes and getting out of there quickly. Well, so now what we do is run around. But by giving us super speed on the clock, it's kind of like we get that movement back, even though we're not in a dodge roll animation. So it's got something kind of, I don't know whether I find it clever or clunky. That's kind of a bit of a through line for the Mirage on me. I don't know whether it's clever or clunky, but they've given us super speed there on one of our other miners. I can imagine some Mesmers being upset and feel like this should just be rolled into the original miner. You get the super speed as well, because really this does just seem to be picking up for a downside that we lost when we elite specialized in the first place. But maybe that won't be as prevalent of his opinion as I suspect it could be. There you go, that's Speed of Sand. That's the way that the miners work. Let's go on to the actual traits themselves, starting with the middle line, and we'll go with Renewing Oasis at the beginning. So we gain regeneration whenever Mirage Cloak is active now. And again, so a dodge roll is giving us super speed and regen. You saw another boon there, which we'll talk about soon. But the regeneration doesn't just heal us a little bit, but it gives us something else now. As a Mirage with this trait, it also reduces condition duration that comes in on us. So how many times have we seen Generation 2? They've had reduction of incoming condition duration. Again, I like this. I think this is the best way to add counter to condi damage in the game. I think that's pretty interesting. So it's not condition damage reduction, it's duration reduction. And the tooltip lists out all of the specific condis that could be on that one. Moving on with the middle line, we've also got Mirage Mantle, and this is the protection. So we gain protection when Mirage Cloak ends. So we dodge. They've been very careful about this. It's when the Mirage Cloak ends. So while it's up us, we don't care about protection because we're evading anyway for that period of time. So they decided to say, okay, we'll give it to you after it finishes, which is why you see the protection pulses out a little bit towards the end there. It's only 1 second, but again, it's just more extra sort of buffing up of our dodge rolls and more reason why we want as much endurance generation as possible, really, as a Mirage. And then finally, we have Elusive Mind. Now, this was one of the first tooltips when I saw Generation 2 Elite Specializations. This was one of the first tooltips I saw. And I remembered seeing this and thinking, wow, look at how ridiculously powerful this is. The new generation of Elite Specializations looks super overtuned. The Mirage looks super overtuned. And I still kind of have that opinion when it comes to this Grandmaster. Any dodge we do is a stun break now. So, like, our dodges just get so crazy overpowered, trigger all that other stuff while we do them, and they're a Condi Cleanse. So, along with the Condi Cleanse from Jaunt, and perhaps if we're running the Torch and stuff, we can retain a bit of Condi Cleanse without having to rely on, like, cleansing on shatters and stuff. So, that's really, really, really strong to me. Again, think about Guild Wars 2 and giving people endurance. We've got the new the new stances, that the Soul Beast can give out. We've got areas that can be dropped that increase endurance generation. We have To the Limit from the Warrior, which pulses full dodge rolls out on people. We have the Signet on the Thief, which pulses full dodge rolls out onto people. The Tempest trait. I really think pumping a lot of endurance onto Mirages is just going to make them crazy. And a Sunbreak, always available as long as you've got the endurance from it. Seems super tasty to me. So they go Elusive Mind. And I guess we'll see what the community does with that. No internal cooldown or anything like that. Just lots of cleanse, lots of stun break. How flighty is a Mesmer running that? Plus jaunts, plus, you know, this shadow step and stuff. I guess we'll see. So that's the middle line for the Mirage. Clearly, it's all about quality of life and staying alive. Let's go bottom line this time. Because I kind of want to end on the top line, which is one of the more profound differences. Here we've got Riddle of Sand. Now, Riddle of Sand finally, and you'll notice Mirage hasn't really done this at all, Riddle of Sand finally looks at shatters. So, if you actually take a step back, Mesmer is all about shatters. And we still have 4 shatters. We still have Distort, even though essentially all of our dodges are like Distorts now. We still have this stuff. But it feels so much like it's about keeping clones up and swapping around in their locations and making them retarget, and phantasms, any of your illusions, just keeping them up instead of shattering. But you are reliant on shattering as a Mesmer to get things done. So, I think a mistake of the Mirage might be that it doesn't do enough with shatters. This is at least one trait where that does happen, though, okay? When entering combat, our first ambush attack that we use will apply confusion. And you're going to ambush. It's not like you're going to make a decision not to ambush. In fact, you're going to. They're powerful skills. You're going to be dodging anyway. You're going to be getting the cloak anyway. So you will be using ambushes. And that's going to be extra confusion. Obviously not relevant at all unless you're a Condi build. They could have made this trigger an attack that had flat damage and confusion on it, but they didn't do that, right? So yeah, that's Riddle of Sand. But then you also regain Riddle of Sand every time you use a shatter. And I do find that quite interesting. So if you pace your dodges out and intersperse them between shatters and proc ambushes as well as you keep flicking between them, I think you could end up stacking a nice amount of Condi there. Maybe the tuning is currently off, and that's very difficult to do. But the idea of this trait, I think, is cool. And maybe if it got, you know, a bit of Torment added into there or whatever to really incentivize people to try for that playstyle, I think that's pretty fun. And yeah, it is important that this offers something for shatters. There you go, Riddle of Sand. And I like the idea that the idea it's a riddle, and then you're doing interesting little flicky things with your skill bar to dart around and trigger it. Next, we have Mirrored Axes. I should go back to the Golems for Mirrored Axes. So this is a trait that actually buffs your axe. Remember, a lot of these Gen 2 elite specs have had traits that buff the weapons that are specific to them, and I've always enjoyed these, really. So the trait is quite non-specific, though, about what it does, and it can be quite hard to see. So I'll turn it off first. So have a very close look at our auto-attack chain here with the axe. And you'll notice you've got, like, these purple swirls, right? So the axe, remember, it's like summoning an illusory axe as we do things. Now, once this golem is dead, Mirrored Axes does this. It reduces the recharge of our axe skills, which already is great. It will mean that we gain charges for our lingering thoughts faster, and that's very strong. But then also it says this here, that axe skills generate an additional phantom axe. So now if you watch the auto chain, when we mouse over it doesn't actually seem any different, but there's sort of this broader, like wider orbiting axe here that you can see now, and that's what the trait is talking about. I believe it also affects the ambush axe, so now you get 3 of those. Did you see? Before we only had 2. It's probably better for me to show the ambush from far away here. So hold on, we'll try and trigger it. Here you're seeing a bit more of the fiddliness, a bit more of the clunkiness. So we will trigger the ambush, use it. And I think there should have been an extra axe that came out on that as well. So that's what it does. It's just more Condi and stuff. It's just more buffs for your Mirrored Axes. And there you go. You can actually see Phantasmal Seeking Axes where it comes up. Release a Phantasmal Axe that seeks out a target after a delay inflicting conditions. And there you have it. So then finally, we have the Elite. Or the Grandmaster, sorry. Now, this is a fun callback to Guild Wars 1. It's called June Cloak, and we use this ability called Sand Shards. Now, people that don't know, one of the most broken things that ever happened in Guild Wars 1 was, for PvP, balance, was when Nightfall came out, the Dervish was added to GW1, and the Dervish had this skill, Sand Shards, and it was like you pulsed out damage every time you missed. So Dervishes would deliberately blind themselves with a Mesmer skill called Signet of Midnight, and then they just attack really quickly while blind, and just pulse out these massive amounts of Sand Shard damage. It was really strong, and a lot of people will have fond memories of using that, and it was fairly quickly nerfed by the devs. This was a thing when Alona was added to Guild Wars 1. Well, Alona is getting added to Guild Wars 2, and, well, well, the Mesmer, the Mirage, is getting the June Cloak. I thought that we might see this appear somewhere else, like on the Sand Shroud with the Scourge, but they put it over here on Mesmer, and I think that's kind of fitting given the whole Signet of Midnight thing. But check it out. So, June Cloak. We use this ability called Sand Shards whenever we gain the Mirage Cloak. And also, conditions that are applied to bleeding foes have increased duration. So as long as you have bleed on them, which you will because of the Sand Shards, all of your condies are lasting 20% longer. So that's big. That's very, very, very... There's a huge amount of condi duration increase. Very, very strong condi trait. And you'll notice that Sand Shards is double bleed for a good duration, and it's on 5 targets. All right? So every time we gain the Mirage Cloak now as well. So every time we dodge, we gain Mirage Cloak, and it puts Sand Shards out, right? So every dodge, guys, let's just be clear about this. Every dodge, we're putting double bleeds out. At least. And I thought I actually saw a little bit more there. So again, just think about generating as much endurance as you can, and it doesn't interrupt your auto attacks. It doesn't interrupt anything else you're doing. You just want to dodge as much as possible. Gain that cloak as much as possible, all right? And you will start spamming out a lot of bleeds. I think people have been underestimating just how much damage can come from Sand Shards and June Cloak. And, well, if it is underpowered, then they can push that up a little bit later as well. But this could be totally, totally bonkers as long as you've got the endurance to proc it. And it's a really cool callback to the previous game. So I like that a lot. Trying to break combat. And lastly, I will show you the top line. So the top line is the first thing I played when I very first experienced the Mirage a few weeks ago. It was under a slightly different balance environment. It was one of my earlier experiences. It felt very overtuned, and it's because it plays with ambushes in a very fun way. It's very clone heavy. So let's go the top line. Let's see what we've got. First of all, self-deception. This affects our utility skills. Using a deception skill will create a clone if we have exactly 2 illusions active. So do you remember how Chronomancer had, what was the trait called? Chronophantasma, maybe? Where you could resummon, you could generate stuff. Well, that's what self-deception is, kind of the Mirage version of that. I'm not quite sure rotationally what you'd want to do and how best to take advantage of this. But yeah, so if we ever have 2 up, so if I go, for example, mirror images, okay? And this is the first combo that I really thought of that would be very cool. We can put 2 up, and then when we jaunt, we gain a 3rd. We can shatter. We can put 2 up through some other method. I'm not sure what you'd want to do. And you jaunt, you get a 3rd. And then we can put 2 up. You know, maybe we weapon swap to something and we put phase retreat, or, you know, we've got a mirror blade here. And then once we've got 2 up, we jaunt and we get a 3rd. So this has got really powerful synergy with jaunt, probably a lot of other stuff, you know, any of the other deceptions, but jaunt obviously is super useful. You can continue doing, and you know, it's little plays like this and that really you're going to want to start considering to truly master Mirage. I think Mirage is not something, its strength is not going to be immediately evident, but it's interesting small plays like this that the community has to figure out and get good at that might take more than, you know, 48 hours over this weekend. Moving on, we have Shards of Glass. Shattered illusions. Oh, sorry. So there's actually 2 shatter traits. I thought this was the only one, Riddle of Sand. There's this one here, which I'd completely forgotten about. Shattered illusions will have a chance of becoming Mirage mirrors. And the reason I forgot about this is because I don't actually like this very much. So we already know what mirrors do. We walk into them, they pulse weakness out, they do that stuff. Whenever I shatter, I've got a chance of creating a mirror. So a 33% chance. So if you do a triple shatter, you should get 1 mirror. Let's summon here again. And let's shatter. There we go, and we get a mirror, and then we can walk into the mirror, and it's a free dodge roll, free ambush, free protection, free super speed, and on and on and on and on and on. So, you know, I think maybe I just have to get more used to the mirrors. Maybe they're not as underwhelming as I first thought. But there you go. So that's this one, the Master tier trait. Now for Grandmaster, this is where things really get blown quite open. Infinite Horizon. What a cool name for a trait. Infinite Horizon does this. When you gain Mirage Cloak, the trait is also applied to all of your illusions. So it says the trait. I think really they should say the active effect. I mean, it's technically, I guess it's a trait, but it's an active effect too. So this gives all of our guys Mirage Cloak. So you might think, okay, so what does that do? Because we got a lot of augments for that, right? So it gives them super speed, which is nice. Chronomancers are familiar with giving super speed, and shatter builds that can be useful. It's not very long duration, but it does it. It gives them vigor, which ultimately doesn't matter too much, and condition damage, which I don't think matters too much. There's some other stuff. We can give them protection. So for phantasms to make them a bit tankier, but I mean, protection is not really going to help our clones. It might give some other stuff. But here's the main thing that it does. It gives them ambush skills. or it only gives some of them ambush skills. This is incredibly nuanced. Look at how deep into this like pile of mechanics we've dug into at this point. But so we can give clones ambush skills, but not phantasms ambush skills. Now, why is that, you might be wondering? It's because phantasms don't have auto attacks. If I summon this berserker onto this indestructible golem over here, he doesn't have he has a skill, yes, which he just used as he rammed his way through, but he doesn't have an auto. And because he doesn't have an auto, you know, he doesn't do the beam, he doesn't do this that I'm doing currently, right? And because he's never autos, he won't ever use an ambush ability because the ambush abilities appear on autos. However, clones do auto. So if I mirror images here with my greatsword, you're going to see my 2 clones are using this beam, okay? And so what that means is if I now dodge roll and I give myself Mirage Cloak, Infinite Horizon gives the Mirage Cloak to my clones, who will then notice an ambush skill is available to them, and they will use the ambush. So watch our beams. We're all going to ambush when I dodge. Ready? I'm going to dodge. And we just triggered massive... You can see what happens with the beams there. So one of the first things I did with Mirage was I summoned a ton of Condi clones, and I immediately started seeing what it was like when we use all of these ambushes together. And this is very, very, very strong, guys. So the devs actually deliberately nerfed clone ambushes, which are slightly weaker. If anyone with real eagle eyes might have noticed that that's been appearing on tooltips, that clones are slightly weaker when they use ambush abilities. But that's how that works. It's all about Infinite Horizon. And the playstyle here is totally different. The playstyle here kind of turns the idea of your illusions on the head. Mesmers, for all these years in Guild Wars 2 so far, have viewed clones as little disposable things for shattering, and phantasms as the big hitters and the guys that roll a lot of damage out. What Infinite Horizon does is it kind of flips that around. It says, actually, no, your clones can start doing damage if you want them to, because you can trigger them to use ambushes as frequently as you could put that cloak on yourself, you know? So, for example, if I break combat here, obviously greatsword is power, and we're not really on a power amulet or anything right now. So if we can get out. What happens if we use a Condi weapon? And this was one of my earliest demonstrations when I did the official post show for the expansion. If we run, say, a staff there, and we'll put a scepter on. Both of these were heavy Condi. If you remember, we got the 5 bounces on the staff. Well, that's still true. We can pop phase retreat, mirror images, and when we dodge roll, all of these guys will use the supercharged autos. Look at those. And as long as I can keep hammering the spacebar, we got 19 confusion, 8 torment, 17, 19, and there's other people in the area, obviously, this isn't just me, as long as you have the endurance. And it's also kind of a funny thing. If you think about being a Phantasm Mesmer who summons duelists on their pistol, you kind of have to wait for them to make up their own mind when they use the barrage. Well, you're in control of that now, because you can just dodge roll. I've been saying press space, by the way, guys. That's my bind for dodge roll. Hopefully I haven't confused people too much. You can dodge roll to control exactly when these barrages of attacks come in. Or you can, once again, I talked about this being quite an underwhelming utility skills earlier. But here, for example, we can summon our clones. And on Scepter, we just do that with autos. And then we can use Crystal Sands to create a mirror right next to us. Pick the mirror up, and it causes them all to go nuts. And then we can dodge roll, and it causes them all to go nuts. And then we can dodge roll again, and it causes them all to go nuts. And then we can summon another mirror, and it causes them all to go nuts. And we're moving further and further back because this is a blink back as we do it. And we're getting the vigor from our other traits, and we're pushing up. So really interesting. For PvP context and stuff, obviously these are clones, so they're very fragile and they can be blown up. But for as long as they're there, Infinite Horizons really can shift what the Mirage is capable of in a pretty big way. And so that's the depth that's really on the Mirage. I think it's got a bit of a bad rap because on surface level, it looks like, oh, there's not much really happening because we don't have an F5 or whatever. But that is not the be-all and end-all for elite specs. And I like what they're going for here. Maybe it's a bit clunky. Maybe it's a bit counterintuitive. I think it definitely needs some tune-ups. And I think that... probably one of its biggest problems is the not interacting too much with shatters, but so far I've been really thrilled by the Mirage. I like it a lot, and under the right circumstances, I think this thing could be really quite devastating. The problem is it competes with Chronomancer, which has so much quality of life. Like the Chronomancer shield is just mental. The Chronomancer's continuum split is also mental. So it's on very steep competition, but I think there is more here than meets the eye. There you go, guys. That's my presentation on the Mirage. We will see how this goes throughout the Path of Fire days. Hopefully I've given you some insight as to the various possibilities. I maybe could have talked a bit more about other interactions, but I guess I will leave it there. Thanks everyone, and I hope to see you very shortly.